Hi guys, my name is Karthik and I am from executeautomation.com and welcome to another video of our EA weekend video series. And in this weekend, we are going to talk about continuous integration and continuous delivery with Azure DevOps service and test project. So this is one of the most important video that we have never discussed in our test project, where we are going to leverage the power of test project to connect with the greater Azure DevOps service. Because Azure DevOps service is one of the service which is being used prevalently in almost most of the company who are developing one of the most robust software for their organizations. And Azure DevOps, which is nothing but an incarnation of Team Foundation Server, the most popular build system. Again, this Azure DevOps service has evolved a lot to support any third-party based applications as well. And in this video, we're going to talk how Azure DevOps is going to integrate with Test Project and how Test Project's powerful APIs can leverage the power of service hooks in Azure DevOps to perform the integration much smoother. So the architecture in this video is going to look something like this. As you can see, this is the architecture that we are going to be working in this particular video. You can see that we have something called as a code check-in happening from my local machine, and then it's going to push the code into the Azure repository. And then the code which is pushed into Azure repository is going to be then automatically trigger the build in Azure pipeline. And once the build is completed, the Azure release pipeline is going to automatically trigger the execution. And then the release pipeline, which is going to be running within the deployment groups of my local machine, is then going to call a service hook, which is nothing but the test project service hook, to run the test which is already recorded in our test projects platform. So I have simplified the code a little bit so that I'm going to use the recorded code which is already available within the test project platform. So I'm just going to consume the test which is already there in the test project platform, and then I'm going to be executing the test once the deployment of my application is complete within my local internet information server. So this is one of the most real-time way of how the execution actually happens and how organization basically works while the application is being deployed and the test actually happens in the CI/CD world. Well, as that said, the agenda of this whole video is going to look something like this. We are going to discuss how we can integrate Test Project API with Azure service hooks, and then we'll see how to configure the release pipeline, and then we can set the automatic trigger as well. And then we'll see how test projects kick in once the build is being deployed within the local internet information server within my machine, all the way from Azure DevOps service, and how the tests are going to be executed. So this whole discussion is something that we'll be discussing in this particular video, which is the agenda of this particular video. As that said, we are not going to discuss some of the other topics as well, something like how the build pipeline works and how the local agents are configured to perform the build within my local machine, and how the deployment group is configured to deploy the application within my local internet information server, and how the process of automation trigger works once the build is completed and the release pipeline automatically kicks in to run that build. All those things we're not going to be discussing. Again, if you think that that's going to be something that you're looking for, please ignore this video, because we're not going to talk about Azure DevOps side. We're too much focused on the test project side of thing, like how to integrate test project's powerful API within Azure DevOps service within the service hooks, and then how we can leverage the power of CI/CD in Azure DevOps service to execute our test. So let's quickly get started and understand how things work. So for that, I'm going to flip to my Edge Chrome browser right now. All right, so now I'm in my Microsoft Edge Chrome browser, and you can see that I have already logged into my test project's platform account. And you can see that the test project platform has a test called EA local test, and this EA local test is something which I'll be using to run the test. And you can see that the URL it is currently pointing is http://localhost:8080. So basically this application is currently running within my local machine because it's already deployed within the internet information server. And you can see that I could able to navigate to this application something like this, and this is what it is going to be testing basically. So it's going to navigate to the menus, and then it's going to verify if I have this text in here. That's it. It's very super simple test and nothing very crazy going on there. So this test I'm just going to execute from my test projects platform, and you can see like how it is going to be executed. And the same test I can also execute with the powerful API feature, which is available within TestProject. So we already discussed about how we can run the test with the API using the Postman in our earlier video. We can use the same option in here as well to execute the code. So now you can see that if I want to execute this particular piece of code, I can use this menu option from here. You can see it looks for the agent and it knows that the latest agent is something which is currently available in my local machine. And once I run the test, it launches the browser and it starts running the test. Boom, the test got passed. Pretty fast, right? So in order to run the same test in multiple browsers, I have created a job in here, which is nothing but the EA local test job. And if I execute this particular piece of job, this job also executes pretty much in all the 3 browsers which is mentioned here, like Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. Pretty nice little tooltip there, which is pretty cool to see how it shows me what are the browsers being added for this particular job. So I'm going to execute this particular job with the API of the test projects. Again, I have already discussed about how you can run the test using TestProject's API like this. And if I run this particular test, you can see the body, it has Chrome, Firefox, and Edge browser. So once I run this, you can see that it creates, shows me a job ID there, which is being executed. And you can see that it has opened a browser. And even if you go to the platform, you can see that the monitor actually shows like what's really happening. So one of the tests is being executed there. So the Chrome test is being completed. That's why you can see it's been done. And now it has opened the Edge browser, I guess. There you go. You can see the Edge test is also completed. And then it's going to open the Firefox, and then it's going to run that test as well. There is some issue with the Firefox browser, I guess. If I go and see the report, and if I go to the test, you can see that the Firefox has got failed, which is all fine because I guess I don't really have Firefox in my machine, and that's the reason the test is been failing, which is all good right now. So you can see that the test is actually being executed even if I try to execute from the API. So this API, the powerful API, is what is going to be very, very helpful for us while executing the test within the Azure DevOps service. Well, as that said, where is this Azure DevOps service and how it's going to look like? So you can see this is the Azure DevOps service that we are going to be using for this particular demonstration. So I have used this Azure DevOps project, which you are seeing here, Udemy course project, heavily for one of my Udemy course, which is nothing but the continuous integration and continuous delivery with Azure DevOps service. And I have discussed a lot of details on how to work with Azure DevOps service, starting from the complete ground up all the way to the boards, repos, pipelines, test plans, and artifact, almost everything which is available within Azure DevOps service. But again, this video has nothing to do with this particular course, so I'm really not going to be talking anything about the course itself. Rather, we are going to talk how we can integrate TestProject within Azure DevOps service using the service hooks. So in order to talk with the TestProject's API, which I just showed you in the Postman in here, I'm going to go to the project settings, and within the project setting, you have something called as service hooks in here. So if you go to the service hooks, you can see that you can actually create a subscription within Azure DevOps service. So this subscription is something which tells you like you can talk with different services which is sitting within your company, or maybe your product is already registered with Azure DevOps service to perform those operations. For instance, App Center, Bamboo, or Jira, or HipChat, or Jenkins, Microsoft Teams, Office 365, Zapier, and Zendesk. So all these are like third-party application which is currently being supported by Azure DevOps service. So if your organization has some option to develop and plugin or a service with Azure DevOps service, it's going to be very, very straightforward. But in here, we don't really see any TestProject service itself. So how do we actually run this particular API? So in order for that to be done, we can use what is called as webhooks. So the webhooks provides an event communication via an HTTP. So it supports all the events and it posts via HTTP as well. So if you see our API that we are going to call, it is a post command. and we are going to execute this particular command to run the test for us. So I'm just going to copy this post HTTP call, and then I'm going to hit next in here, and you can see that it brings me up the triggers. So this trigger is something very, very important. When do you really need to execute this test? Do you need to execute this test during the build completion, or during the code push, or the pull request committed on or created and something like that, or the release being created? So I'm going to choose release being created, because once the release is done, I'm going to actually trigger this particular test to be executed. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And then I'm going to create a filter. So basically it's going to ask me which release pipeline that I'm going to be executing. Well, you can see that I have many pipeline. These pipelines are actually being used for my course creation. So I'm actually not going to use any of these pipeline, because that's going to disturb my course, which I've already created. So I'm just going to go to the release pipeline of Azure DevOps service, and I'm going to create a new release pipeline itself. And this pipeline, I'm going to call this as TestProject pipeline. But before that, I'm going to create a stage in here pretty quickly. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to be deploying an Internet Information Servers application within my local IIS. So I'm going to say this is IIS deployment, and I'm going to close this guy, and it's going to ask me the artifacts. So I'm just going to add the artifacts, and I already know that within my project, I'm going to choose the ASP.NET Core application, and I'm going to choose the source alias as a drop, and I'm going to hit add there. So that's going to bring the latest artifact which is currently sitting within my project. Well, as that said, there are two jobs in here. So I'm going to quickly add the website name, which is the EA employee app. And I'm going to set the deployment groups. So as I told you before, I'm not going to be really talking about the deployment groups and stuff in here, because those are something completely not required for this particular video. So you can see that it already picked up the drop folder for me, and also has the UI test, which is Selenium UI test, as you can see in here. But we're not going to be using this UI test for this demonstration. We are going to be using the test which is already sitting within our test project. All right, so this drop folder is also looking good, and the Internet Information Server is going to be running over here. Just that you can see I was using the port number 81 for my local host, so I should be using the port number 81 as well. So in order for that to be done, I'm gonna go over here to the IIS app deployment for the add bindings, and I'm gonna override app bindings from 80 to 81. I'm gonna hit OK. So this way, if you can see in here, the application is going to be deploying within the 81 path, which is good. Leave all these options as it is, because those should be more than enough. And then I'm going to hit save. And I'm also going to do one more option in here, which is nothing but the automatic trigger. So I'm just going to enable the automatic trigger of the continuous deployment. And I'll also make sure that in here for this particular automatic deployment, I'm not really filtering any of the branch, because any branch it is gonna just run the release for us, which is all good right now. So I'm just gonna save it. I'm gonna say automatic trigger. I'm gonna hit OK. So I'm not really gonna create any release in here, because we already have a release over here, as you can see, which is nothing but the new release pipeline. As I told, we need to rename this to TestProject pipeline, and hit save, add a name, and hit OK. So you can see we now have what is called as a TestProject pipeline. So this is the pipeline that we'll be using for our hooks that we are going to be creating. So once again, I'm going to quickly run into the webhooks. I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to say once the release has been created, you gotta use the TestProject pipeline. So now we can see that we have this particular pipeline sitting in. So I'm going to choose this guy, and I'm going to hit next, and it's going to perform a post via HTTP. So once again, the post is going to happen using this particular API call, which is going to be this one. It's looking for the basic authentication username and basic authentication password. I don't really have to give all those things because I'm going to pass the HTTP header for that option. So I'm going to pass the authorization over here as my API key from test project. So once again, the API key of your test project is going to be sitting within your integration for menu. So if you go here and if you go to the API, you can see that it has all the API keys. So I have just used this API for my test, which I'm going to show you right now. So that's the API key I have used, which is all good. And I'm going to use the resource version of 3.0 preview, which is all good as well. So let's quickly see a test and make sure that the test actually executes without any problem. So once I do a test, you can see that it shows me succeeded, which is good. So once it is succeeded, which means it is going to open a browser for us. There you go. It just opened a browser and it is going to execute the test that we are actually looking for. So you should be running the test within my local HTTP. There you go. You can see pretty faster. Just executed the test for us in the Chrome browser. And then it's going to run the test on the Edge Chrome browser as well. And it should execute a test in the Firefox browser. For some reason, I don't really have Firefox. That's why the test is going to fail, which is okay for now. All good. So I'm just going to hit close and I'm going to hit finish. So this way, the service hooks for the test project is pretty much done. So now you can see that we have an integration in here. Well, as that said, now we can go to the pipeline. You can see that I have already configured the build pipeline to trigger once I check in a code over here for my development in Visual Studio. So once I check in the code, it's going to kick in the build pipeline, and once the build pipeline is executed, then it's going to kick in the release pipeline for me to perform the operation because we have already set that as well. So let's quickly see how this operation is going to happen. So as a developer, I'm just going to change a code in here within my application. So you can see if I go here to the application, you can see it says learn how to build an app anywhere, something like that. So maybe if I just change, there is a powerful new feature in Visual Studio 2019 for building the application of the modern application. So I'm just going to change a small text there just to see how the deployment is going to happen. And it's going to change. You can see that I made a small change. Added code change in app UI. And I'm going to hit commit and sync. And just to make sure how it works, if I go to the pipeline, you can see that currently no executions are happening. So now if I hit push, you can see that it's currently pushing to the master branch, which is all good. So once I did that, you can see that within my Azure, let me click the pipeline. You can see that it's currently executing the code for us, or which is nothing but it is building added code change in the app UI. It's currently executing. And it's going to execute within my local machine agent. Oops, I think I don't really have my agent running. So I quickly spawn my agent to be executed. So this agent is actually configured to talk with Azure DevOps service. So once it is connecting to the service, you will see there is a change. You can see that it's waiting on the agent to receive the acknowledgement from the request. And there you go. The job is running. So this agent is pretty much like how TestProject has its own agent within our machine, the TestProject agent. We just keep listening to the TestProject's platform. Similarly, we have a Visual Studio's build agent, which is listening for any build to be executed. So once the build starts executing, it is going to perform build, and then it's quickly do a sanity test, and then it's going to do a publishing of the code, and then it's going to create an artifacts and all those stuff for us. So you can see all those things are going to be happening for us automatically. So now it's creating a artifact. And there we go. So the whole execution is now completed. Once this is done, if you go to the release pipeline right now to the test project release, you can see that this is automatically happening for us as well, guys. So now it is deploying the application within the release pipeline over here for us, which is also pretty cool. And while the application is currently being, while the application has been deployed there within my pipeline, it is also executing the test for us within the test project's platform. You can see that currently it is also testing my application, how it is being deployed, and all those testing is also being executed, which is pretty cool, right? So now the whole operation, like continuous integration and continuous delivery, happened during the application code has been checked in. It's going to be built in the build pipeline, and the application is going to be released within the release pipeline over here. And once the release is done, it is also side by side execute the test within test of my application with the test project's platform. So now if I go to the test project over here and I just refresh this report, and you can see that for this time, 4:48 or 4:46 p.m., I actually see one more report which has been executed from our CI/CD to execute this test. So you can see that the Chrome and the Edge Chrome browser successfully completed, whereas the test of the Firefox got failed, which is okay because we know how it was executing before. It was not working. So, which means it proves the point that the test actually executes without any problem from the continuous integration and continuous delivery with Azure DevOps service with test projects integration using service hooks, and thanks to the powerful API which has been created by the test projects team. So once again, thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you really enjoyed the integration of the test projects with the Azure pipelines. Thank you.